you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Schwartz, on February 18th of this year, I sent you a letter which contained 13 distinct groupings of questions. The board responded on April 15th, 2015. Do you believe that this April 15th letter was fully responsive to all my questions?
When we responded to your letter, we responded the best way we could.
I ask you, though, do you believe that it was fully responsive to all my questions?
Is there something that you felt you still need an answer to? I apologize for that. I thought we did answer the questions, yes.
So you answer yes, that you think you fully responded to my questions.
What I think is, when we received your letter, we put together answers that were the very best answers to your questions we could put together, yes.
So your answer is yes, thank you. I'm not sure that they were fully responsive. For instance, in question 2, I asked,
Sure.
if Congress were to enact legislation to limit occupational disability to a time certain, how long a period would you recommend? And you dodged that question. You said you needed time to consult with other stakeholders. After I sent the letter, you requested an extension to fully respond. I think you've had plenty of time to respond and to discuss with the stakeholders. So if Congress were to limit the time a person could draw benefits, how long would that be?
I would have to say rail labor and rail management would have to be involved in those discussions.
Okay. And question 4. I asked how many disability fraud referrals have been made to the Inspector General. In your response, you provide the number 44. But it's my understanding that 38 of those are unemployment cases. That would make, in my opinion, it would make the response inaccurate and perhaps misleading. Would you agree that an unemployment case is not the same as a disability case?
If you were talking about investigative disability cases, in other words, referring to the Inspector General for an investigation, you're exactly right, it is different.
Okay, then that begs the question of why you answered the question the way you did. The question was how many disability fraud referrals have been made to the Inspector General? And you said 44. 38 of those were unemployment cases. If they're not disability cases, does that mean there were only 6? But yet you answered 44. Can you respond to that?
No, I can't respond to that. I mean, when we worked with our people and asked them how many had been submitted, they said 44, and basically it turns out, if it's 6, apologize for the answer.
Mr. Dickman, do you have any idea of how many disability fraud claims were referred to your office?
I think 4. No, I think less than 4. I think it might be 2.
Okay. On question 7, I note that the latest statistics for the occupational disability approval rate is 98%. And then I ask you for updated numbers. Did you provide updated numbers in your response?
98%. I think we just assumed that throughout the letter it was 98%, and apparently we did not put down 98%. It's 98%.
I find that interesting, particularly in context of question 5. It indicates that your answer to question 5 that indicated that examiners who were doing the disability exams were to consult with a medical professional, and not that the disability applicant submit to or that the disability, let me rephrase that they consult with a medical professional rather than have a disability applicant submit to an exam by a medical professional. And then you also say that you require a Social Security disability examiner and a Social Security Administration medical professional to review the case prior to the Railroad Retirement Board review and decision. How has this process impacted the RRB's disability approval rate?
What happens is there's two types of disabilities. There's total and permanent, there's occupational. About 33% of our cases end up going to Social Security for review. The Social Security rate, Dan, is probably somewhere in the 70s?
78.
Yeah, so Social Security rate somewhere around 78%. What's happening is we're just putting this plan in place. Basically, we're putting a plan in place that'll have doctors involved, have exams by doctors. We will have a quality assurance unit. We will have training.
Let me interrupt you. You say you will have exams by doctors. Now, based on the response to the question, you said that you would have Social Security disability examiner and a medical professional review the case. In other words, the disability examination would be done by someone else, but you would have a medical professional associated with Social Security to review the case. That's not the same as having a medical professional do the evaluation.
Every application in our plan that comes in will have an independent medical exam.
And it's also interesting, and you know, I'll check my numbers.
Mr. Palmer, your time has expired, and we're going to have a second round, so if you can hang around. If not, I'll let you
May I
ask one last question.
One
Sure.
last question. The numbers that I have on Social Security approval rate is less than 40% before appeal and 65% after appeal, but you say 78%?
No, the total and permanent program is at 78%. Social Security Administration's initial claims approval rate is about 30%. And that's problematic for us because apparently, or supposedly, these Social Security Administration and IRB are using the same criteria. So the pretty wide gulf between what's being approved at the Social Security level versus IRB.
Well, apparently. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the gentleman from Wisconsin for asking for the number of people added to the disability rolls each year, particularly since I asked that question in my letter and you did not provide that. So I'm very pleased to know that you do have that information, that you'll provide it at least to Mr. Grothman. So another thing that I wanted to bring up, in your response to me, you said it's rare for someone who has left the industry for an extended period for self-employment to then become entitled to an occupational disability annuity. Yet, in the Inspector General's written testimony points to an example in the agency's disability claims manual where an individual left the railroad employment for 16 years, but still retains their current connection with the railroad industry. That may be, even if that's the only example, does it make sense that an individual can be able to claim an occupational disability from a job they haven't held for 16 years?
Well, current connection was put into place actually to prevent people. They wanted to make sure that people had a current connection to the railroad. That is, it's very rare. And he did put an example in there that was in the manual. It's exactly true. It's very rare that would happen.
Okay, I'm going to ask you something else in context of my letter. I asked for copies of all the correspondence, including emails related to the RRB's decision to utilize very specific language in their termination letters to the Long Island Railroad Occupational Disability Annuitants. You attached a February 1st, 2013 memo from Inspector General Dickman regarding this topic. Is this the only communication that exists regarding this subject matter? And if not, why didn't you provide the information I requested?
I think you were referring to Mr. Dickman asking us not to go back and recover claims, and that was the correspondence we had for that. The letter that he had sent that said not to recover. Which question you're talking about? I have to look at the question here.
I asked for copies of all correspondence, including the emails relating to the decision to utilize very specific language in the termination letters. I'm going to ask you again to provide that information and provide it for the committee. I want to move on. In question, The board's response indicated that there, and this is your response to my letter to question 9, that there was a recent meeting with Dr. Robert McClellan, the chief of the Occupational Environmental Medical Section at Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center and associate professor at the Geisel School of Medicine at Dartmouth. In June 2014, the Inspector General had forwarded you a lengthy list of poignant recommendations authored by Dr. McClellan. Why did it take the agency 9 months to contact him? Mr. Chairman, if he's...
I think that what it comes down to is we were looking at all the possibilities to improve our disability program. We want to enhance it. We want to make it better. We want to change the way we do things. Dr. McClellan is one of the people we thought we should talk to, as suggested by Mr. Dickman, to get his ideas on how to do that.
Well, the last thing that I want to ask you is what actions will the board take regarding his recommendations? Because as Mr. Connolly has said, as Mr. Meadows has said, I think all of us here, our objective is good government. Our objective is to do what's best for the employees of the railroad. And I think in that regard, implementing these recommendations, you've heard from Mr. Bertoni, you've heard from Mr. Dickman. I want to know if what you intend to do, if you intend to implement these recommendations. And then I've got one last question.
All 5 of Mr. Bertoni's recommendations we intend to implement. Many of Mr. Dickman's we intend to implement, and as I said, Mr. Dickman and I will be sitting down and going through them and making sure he has a response to all of his recommendations.
I'm good with that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.